We are joined by John Bolton, the former National Security Advisor to President Trump. Sir, thank you so much for joining us on Euronews.
Glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
And of course, you worked very closely with the president in his first term. You know how he works. You know his psyche, his mind. And that is important because ultimately he is the commander in chief. What we're seeing now is a timeline that looks erratic. The goals appear to be changing. Is there a plan?
Well, I don't think anybody knows the answer to that, including Donald Trump. I think he said at the outset his goal was regime change. Many of his advisors have said the goal was something else. But as recently as a few days ago in a speech in Kentucky, Trump said, we don't want to have to come back and do this every 2 years, which strongly implies regime change in his mind is still the objective.
So that is the goal, and you're also a vocal supporter of regime change in Iran. But from the outside, it seems this regime is not changing, or if anything, is doubling down on the hardliners, and the protests are not really happening. Is regime change really possible now, 3 weeks into this war?
Well, it took them 47 years to build the regime, so I don't think anybody should be surprised that it hasn't collapsed in 3 weeks. Hundreds of top leaders have been eliminated. And the bases and communications and assets of the Revolutionary Guard have been decimated. It's not really a question of the people going out in the streets. It's a question of working with figures in the regime who don't want to go down with the ship and who, as the regime comes apart at the top, will come over to the side of the opposition.
So can I ask you very bluntly, is this now a moment where the U.S. and Israel need to double down until it's done?
Well, I think if Trump really wants regime change, he certainly could have done a lot better preparation for it. But if that's your objective, you have to have patience and persistence to see it through, because if you give up before you accomplish it, you may be worse off than if you had never started it.
Okay, so if you want to accomplish it, however, the president was clear today that he will not put boots on the ground. Is he going to have to in the end?
Well, that's what he says today. Who knows what he'll say tomorrow? I mean, there is a contingent of Marines on the way, and we'll see how things develop.
And if this doesn't go well for the president, are we looking at the biggest diplomatic disaster for the U.S. in decades? Do you look at this as a major mistake, strategic mistake?
Well, Trump will declare victory no matter what happens. And the argument will be that the nuclear weapons program has been set back further, that their support for international terrorism has been set back further. But if the regime survives, however much damage has been done to it, it will build back, and the nuclear threat and the terrorism threat will simply return.
And of course, that means that the Operation Epic Fury becomes an epic flop. I do want to ask you, however, in terms of the coordination with Israel, we did see the president saying Israel should not hit energy. And he also put out that social media post saying Israel is slashing. They need to stop that. How close do you think these two are working?
Well, I think they're working very closely. In the White House this morning with Japanese Prime Minister Takaichi there, he said he had spoken to Netanyahu, that he was aware of the attack, and that he suggested Netanyahu not do it. But then he said, we're very well coordinated and everything's fine.
And let me just ask you a final question, sir. When it comes to Europeans, today we saw once again, the idea that the Europeans are not rushing to help in the Strait of Hormuz. They also say that the region needs to de-escalate at this stage. And some voices even say this war is totally illegal. So is that going to be a problem for the Europeans and President Trump going forward when it comes certainly in the context of NATO?
Well, I think it is a problem because the European reaction is incorrect. This is Europe's war. Europe's just as much, even more at risk on the nuclear side.
Why, sir? Why is it Europe's war?
Because Europe is just as much, if not more, at risk from nuclear attacks. If Iran gets nuclear weapons, it has the missile capability to hit Central and Eastern Europe, not the United States. And Iran has carried out terrorist attacks in Europe. And to say, as some European leaders have, that it's not Europe's war is simply an invitation to Donald Trump to say, okay, fine, it's not Europe's war. And, Ukraine, it's not America's war. That's a mistake.
Well, sir, thank you so much for joining us on Euronews. Appreciate it as always.